A starting condition with these vehicles is a common problem. We're going to go over that and several other common problems on this Ford Taurus. Let's start with an oil leak. Maybe you just went for a ride. You get back to your parking spot, you get out of the vehicle, and there's a lot of smoke coming from under the hood. It's a little worrisome, and it smells really bad. You pop the hood and you take a peek. There's a lot of smoke coming from in the top of the engine area, so that's the first place you're going to take a look. Common areas to have an oil leak along here would be the valve cover gaskets. I've seen it plenty of times where the valve cover gasket leaks a little bit. It's going to start making its way down the engine onto that hot exhaust. You're going to have an exhaust manifold on the front and the rear of this engine. Now when this happens, the hot exhaust of course is going to burn up that oil and you're going to get that smoke making its way all the way up through that hood, and it's going to of course cause that smell. If you're under here and you can't see any oil coming from the valve covers, or even if you do see oil coming from the valve covers, you don't want to stop there when looking for an oil leak. There's other places that can leak. Another super common area to have an oil leak on these particular vehicles is the engine oil pan gasket. For this, you're going to have to make your way underneath the vehicle though. Now when you're under there, you're looking for the engine oil pan. It's right out in the open, you can see the drain plug and everything. But where we're really paying attention to most commonly is over on the passenger side where your crank seal is, or the crank pulley seal. It's common to have a seal leak here. When this happens, the engine oil is going to start running out down along that area, and there's actually an exhaust pipe that runs directly underneath there as well. Once again, oil on hot exhaust is going to cause smoke. It could get a little bit worse than that, and it can be extremely dangerous, especially if you're running your blower motor and it's drawing air in from your engine compartment or pretty much anywhere around the front of the vehicle here, close to your windshield, and bringing it into the passenger compartment. If you can smell it inside the passenger compartment, you definitely want to take care of this issue. Fix the oil leak, replace the oil and the filter at the same time. The next problem we're going to talk about comes down to an idling issue. This is going to be most prominent when the vehicle's cold, like as in you just started it up. You might find that once you do start it up, you're looking at the idle on the dash there, and you can see that it looks like it's fluctuating up and down, and the vehicle might even eventually stall out on you. This is commonly due to your IAC valve, which is located on your air intake system, right up along the top here. Other symptoms you might happen to find if you did have an issue with the IAC valve might not necessarily just be the fluctuation or even that stalling condition, but you might find that you have a hesitation during acceleration. Common reasons for this is due to the fact that there's carbon going to be located on the inside of this valve. You'd have to actually take it off to take a peek along the backside. If you see a whole bunch of black inside there, that's carbon buildup. Look a little bit harder. In that area, you're going to find a small plunger. It should be able to move in and out a little bit. That carbon can restrict this from doing its job, whether it's preventing it from opening or even closing. The computer's trying to say, hey, I need you to open up a little bit to bring up this idle for some reason, and the valve's trying, but that carbon is just holding it up. So realistically, it only makes the most sense to just go to 1AUTO.com, order yourself a new one for easy replacement. Now let's get back to that initial long crank scenario that you had heard at the beginning of the video. Now this is a common issue on these particular vehicles, and it typically comes down to the camshaft position sensor. That camshaft position sensor is located on the driver's side of the engine, just down underneath where the IAC valve is located. We just finished talking about that. The job of the camshaft position sensor is to talk to the vehicle's computer and let it know what position the camshaft is in. If you did have an issue with the camshaft position sensor, typically you're going to find that you have a long crank scenario, like what you saw. You might also find that you have a check engine light, and when the vehicle does run, it might have a hesitation under acceleration. If you did have to replace it, it's fairly simple overall on this particular vehicle. When you have it out though, you want to have a quick look at the magnet area. It's supposed to have a magnet that reads closely to the camshaft synchronizer. That's actually a shaft that's located inside of the engine. If when looking at the sensor once you have it out, you can't see a magnet or it looks like it's broken in any way, you want to have a real close look down inside this area at that synchronizer. If the magnet is missing or damaged, you definitely want to replace the camshaft position sensor, of course. Find that magnet and make sure that the camshaft synchronizer isn't damaged as well. If it is, you want to replace them both at the same time. Now let's move over to the other side of the engine. On the passenger side, rearward valve cover here, you're going to find a heated PCV valve. The PCV valve is heated electronically, and that's to help prevent freeze-up in colder climates. How the PCV valve goes bad is typically due to sludge buildup of some sort. Now this can cause runnability issues, but most likely the symptom that you're going to find is constant or frequent oil leaks. That's due to the pressure that's getting built up in that crankcase. If the pressure can't evacuate and make its way up into the intake where it's supposed to get burnt up in the combustion chamber, it has to go somewhere. It's going to start pushing out on those gaskets, potentially making an oil leak. If you find that you replace an oil pan gasket or even your valve cover gaskets, and then eventually, not too long after that, you have an oil leak again, it could be due to this one little part called a PCV valve. As I mentioned, it's over here on the passenger side and it's very easy to get to. Let's move along to talking about issues with motor mounts. This is common on these vehicles. It has several motor mounts and it's extremely important to have them. Essentially, while your engine's running, it's going to be vibrating and shifting around a little bit. You wouldn't want to have the engine mounted directly to your subframe or body of the vehicle, otherwise you're going to feel every vibration. So there's going to be rubber mounts. This vehicle has several engine mounts making their way around the engine. Most of them are down along the bottom. There is one up along the top, but the ones that are down lower are the ones that generally have the biggest issues. The two that we're talking about are actually hydraulic filled, so they have fluid inside of them. When the seal goes bad, the fluid makes its way out, and then the mount can't do its job properly. At that point, the engine can shift around. If you're sitting at a red light, the light turns green, and you go to accelerate, and you hear a loud clunk coming from inside of your engine compartment, that could tell you that you have a serious issue with one or multiple of your engine mounts. The engine's shifting around and potentially hitting up against something. This can cause issues with wiring. It can also cause issues with other things because if the engine can move around and potentially hits up against something, it can cause damage. If you're having this issue with the clunking noise during acceleration, you want to make sure you diagnose it properly. Check all the motor mounts. This is easiest with a second person. You want to have the second person inside of the vehicle. They'll have it running. With the foot on the brake, they want to go ahead and put it in reverse and then tap on that gas pedal a little bit, trying to shift the engine. The other person's going to be out here and we're watching the engine from a distance. We're seeing how much it shifts. After doing that several times in reverse, you can also do it in drive, repeating this process. While looking at the motor mounts, if it looks like they're moving around a lot, it's a good idea to go ahead and replace them, especially if it looks like the seals or even the rubber's cracked or damaged in any way. When you do them, just go ahead and do them all at the same time. It doesn't make sense to do one and have other worn out mounts that can potentially cause other damage to the brand new mount that you just installed.